My name is Richard, I'm 68 years old, and what was supposed to be a quiet dinner with my daughter turned into the most terrifying night of my life. As she left the table, the waiter leaned in and whispered words I'll never forget, "Don't drink that juice, it's not safe." Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. You know, when you reach my age, you think you've seen everything. You think you understand people, especially your own children. You think the worst betrayals come from strangers, from enemies, from people who never claimed to love you. But I was wrong. God, was I wrong? Let me take you back to that evening. It was a Thursday in September, and I had just sold my construction business after 43 years of blood, sweat, and concrete dust under my fingernails. 43 years of 16-hour days, of missing birthday parties and school plays, of sacrificing everything to build something that would last. Something I could leave behind. Something that would take care of my family long after I was gone. The sale had gone through that morning, and the check was sitting in my bank account, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. 7 figures. A lifetime of work reduced to numbers on a screen, but numbers that represented freedom. Numbers that represented security for my daughter Sarah and her 2 beautiful children. Numbers that meant I could finally rest. Sarah had suggested we celebrate at Romano's, this elegant little Italian place downtown. You know the type, soft lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of restaurant where you whisper instead of talk, where every detail screams sophistication and safety. The kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. Where families come together to mark the good moments in life. I should have known something was wrong from the moment I walked in. Sarah was already there with her husband Marcus, sitting at a corner table that felt too isolated, too private. She stood up to hug me, but there was something in her smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something brittle and rehearsed, like she was playing a part in a play she'd memorized but didn't understand. "Dad," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud for the intimate setting. "Congratulations on the sale. I'm so proud of you." But even as she said the words, I could see something else in her expression. A nervousness that made my stomach clench, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Marcus stood up too, shaking my hand with that firm grip he'd perfected over the years, the one that was supposed to convince me he was worthy of my daughter. His smile was wider than usual, and there was something in his eyes that looked almost hungry. "Richard," he said, pumping my hand a beat too long, "this is such a momentous occasion. The end of an era, the beginning of a new chapter. We're so happy to be here to celebrate with you." The way he said it made my skin crawl, though I told myself I was being paranoid. Marcus had always been a little too smooth, a little too interested in my business dealings, but Sarah loved him. And after her mother died 5 years ago, Sarah's happiness had become the most important thing in my world. We sat down, and I noticed how Marcus kept glancing at Sarah, these quick little looks that seemed to carry some kind of message. She would nod almost imperceptibly, like they were having a conversation I wasn't privy to. The kind of silent communication that married couples develop, except this felt different. This felt secretive. The waiter brought menus, and Sarah immediately launched into chatter about the restaurant, about how she'd heard the Osso Buco was incredible, about how this was exactly the kind of place to mark such a special occasion. But her words felt hollow, like she was filling silence to avoid something else. Something more important. I ordered a simple pasta dish. My stomach had been acting up lately, stress from the sale, I thought, and when the waiter asked about drinks, Sarah jumped in before I could speak. "My father will have the fresh orange juice," she said quickly. "He's been trying to eat healthier since retirement started." I started to protest. I'd been looking forward to a glass of wine, something to mark the occasion, but Sarah was already waving the waiter away, and Marcus was nodding approvingly, talking about how smart it was to take care of your health at my age. The way they tag-teamed the conversation, shutting down my preferences so smoothly, should have been a red flag. But I was tired, and I wanted to keep the peace, and I told myself that Sarah was just looking out for me the way I'd always looked out for her. The juice arrived in a tall glass, fresh squeezed and pulpy, the kind of healthy drink that Sarah had been pushing on me ever since her mother's cancer diagnosis. It sat in front of me, innocent and golden, while we made small talk about the weather, about the grandkids, about everything except what this dinner was really supposed to be about. But as the conversation went on, I started to notice things. Little things that individually meant nothing but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. The way Sarah kept glancing at the juice glass. The way Marcus checked his watch every few minutes. The way they both seemed to be waiting for something. "Dad," Sarah said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of urgency I'd never heard before, "you should drink your juice before it gets warm. Fresh orange juice is so much better when it's cold." I reached for the glass, and that's when I saw it. Just a tiny residue around the rim, barely visible unless you were looking for it. A slight cloudiness that didn't belong in fresh squeezed orange juice. My hand froze halfway to the glass, and something deep in my gut started screaming warnings I didn't want to hear. "In a minute, sweetheart," I said, pulling my hand back. "Let me just settle in first." But Sarah's smile faltered, just for a second, and in that moment I saw something that made my blood run cold. Disappointment. Not the kind of disappointment you feel when someone doesn't take your advice about their health. The kind of disappointment you feel when a carefully laid plan hits an unexpected snag. Marcus jumped in immediately, his voice smooth as silk. "Sarah's right, Richard. Fresh juice loses its vitamin content when it sits. You might as well be drinking sugar water at that point." The way he said it, the slight edge beneath the casual tone, made every nerve in my body stand at attention. These weren't the words of a son-in-law concerned about my nutrition. These were the words of someone who needed me to drink that juice. Who was counting on me drinking that juice? My phone rang then, cutting through the tension like a knife. It was my lawyer, calling about some final paperwork for the business sale. I started to let it go to voicemail, but Sarah practically jumped out of her seat. "Take it, Dad," she said, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. "This could be important." "We'll wait." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. Business calls don't wait for dinner." I stood up, confused by their sudden enthusiasm for interrupting our celebration, but I walked to the restaurant's lobby to take the call. It was nothing urgent, just a question about where to send some final documents, but the 5-minute conversation gave me time to think. Time to let the unease that had been building all evening crystallize into something closer to fear. When I walked back to the table, Sarah and Marcus were huddled together in intense conversation that stopped the moment they saw me. They sprang apart like teenagers caught making out, but there was nothing innocent about the guilt in their expressions. "Everything okay with the lawyer?" Marcus asked, his tone carefully casual. "Just paperwork," I said, sitting back down. The juice glass was exactly where I'd left it, but something about it looked different. The condensation on the outside seemed disturbed, as if the glass had been moved and then carefully repositioned. Sarah was watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Dad, you really should drink that juice. You haven't touched it, and you need to stay hydrated." There was something in her voice that I'd never heard before. A kind of desperate urgency that had nothing to do with my hydration levels and everything to do with something else. Something that made my hands shake as I reached for the glass. That's when it happened. As my fingers closed around the cool glass, as I lifted it toward my lips, the waiter appeared beside me like a guardian angel. He was a young man, maybe 25, with kind eyes and hands that trembled slightly as he leaned down close to my ear. His voice was barely a whisper, so quiet that I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Sir, please, don't drink that. I saw your daughter put something in it while you were away. It isn't safe." The world stopped. Everything stopped. The gentle murmur of conversation around us, the clink of silverware against plates, the soft jazz playing in the background, it all faded into a roaring silence that filled my ears like ocean waves. My heart didn't just skip a beat, it seemed to stop entirely, leaving me suspended in a moment of absolute, crystalline horror. I stared at the glass in my hand, this innocent-looking glass of orange juice that I'd been about to drink. This glass that my daughter, my own flesh and blood, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, the woman I'd walked down the aisle just 3 years ago, had poisoned while I was taking a phone call about business paperwork. The waiter straightened up and walked away quickly, but not before I saw the genuine fear in his eyes. This wasn't a prank or a misunderstanding. This young man had risked his job, maybe his safety, to save the life of a stranger. Because that's what I was to him, a stranger. But to the people sitting across from me, the people who were supposed to love me more than anyone else in the world, I was something else entirely. I was a problem to be solved. My hand was shaking so violently that the juice sloshed against the sides of the glass. Sarah noticed immediately, and the mask she'd been wearing all evening finally slipped completely. "Dad," she said, and her voice was sharp now, predatory. "What's wrong? You look pale." I set the glass down carefully, as if it contained nitroglycerin instead of poison, and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me had my eyes and her mother's nose, but there was something else there now. Something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before, or maybe something I'd chosen not to see. "I'm fine," I managed to say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. "Just, not very thirsty anymore." Marcus leaned forward, and I could see the panic starting to creep into his expression. "Come on, Richard. 1 glass of juice. It's good for you." The way he said it made my stomach turn. How long had they been planning this? How many conversations had they had about the best way to murder me? Had they discussed it over breakfast, while my grandchildren ate their cereal at the same table? Had they planned it in bed, whispering about my death like other couples whisper about their dreams? "You know what?" I said, standing up on legs that felt like rubber, "I think I need some air. I'll be right back." I walked toward the restroom, but instead of going inside, I ducked into an alcove near the kitchen and pulled out my phone. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely dial, but somehow I managed to call 911. 911, what's your emergency? "I'm at Romano's restaurant on 5th Street, I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion I couldn't contain. "Someone just tried to poison me. My daughter, my own daughter put something in my drink." Even as I said the words, I couldn't believe them. Couldn't process the reality of what was happening. This was the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when I had to work late, who told me I was her hero when she was 7 years old. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" I don't know. I don't think so. Not if I don't drink what they gave me." "Stay on the line, sir. Officers are on their way." I hung up and stood there in that alcove, listening to the normal sounds of a restaurant going about its business while my world collapsed around me. Somewhere in the dining room, my daughter was probably wondering why I was taking so long. Probably discussing with her husband whether they should come look for me, whether their plan was falling apart, whether they needed to try something else. When I finally walked back to the table, they were both staring at me with expressions I couldn't read. Sarah's smile looked like it had been painted on with a brush, and Marcus was gripping his wine glass so tightly his knuckles were white. "Feeling better?" Sarah asked, but there was no warmth in the question. "Much," I said, sitting down but keeping my hands well away from the juice glass. And then we waited. The three of us sat there making stilted conversation about nothing, while underneath the surface a battle was being fought between love and greed, between family and money, between the man I thought I'd raised and the stranger sitting across from me. I could see Sarah growing more agitated as the minutes passed. She kept glancing at the untouched juice, kept finding excuses to mention how I should finish it. Marcus was checking his watch again, his leg bouncing under the table with nervous energy. "Dad," Sarah said finally, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration, "you're not drinking your juice. Are you feeling okay?" Before I could answer, I heard them. Footsteps that were too heavy, too purposeful for a restaurant full of diners enjoying their evening meals. I turned toward the entrance and saw 2 police officers scanning the room, their eyes settling on our table with the precision of guided missiles. The look on Sarah's face when she saw them will haunt me for the rest of my life. Pure terror mixed with rage, the expression of someone watching their carefully laid plans crumble in real time. Marcus went pale as death, his hand frozen halfway to his wine glass. "Richard Thompson," one of the officers asked as they approached our table. "That's me. We received a call about a possible poisoning incident. Is this the beverage in question?" He gestured to the orange juice glass, and I nodded, not trusting my voice to work properly. The entire restaurant had gone quiet now, other diners turning to stare at our table with the morbid fascination that people have for other people's disasters. The second officer was already pulling on latex gloves, carefully lifting the glass and sealing it in an evidence bag. "We'll need to have this tested," he said. "In the meantime, I'm going to need to speak with everyone at this table." Sarah found her voice then, but it came out as a screech that bore no resemblance to the daughter I'd raised. "This is ridiculous. Dad, tell them this is some kind of mistake." But I couldn't. I couldn't lie for her, couldn't protect her from the consequences of what she'd tried to do. Because what she tried to do was murder me. Her own father. The man who'd sacrificed everything to give her a good life. "Sarah," I said, and my voice was steady now, strengthened by a rage so pure it burned away everything else. "Why?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether to keep up the pretense or admit to what we both knew was true. Marcus was making small whimpering sounds, like a wounded animal caught in a trap. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice breaking. "We needed the money, Dad. We needed it now, not years from now when you finally decide to die of natural causes." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Years from now when you finally decide to die. As if my continued existence was an inconvenience she'd been tolerating, an obstacle standing between her and what she believed was rightfully hers. "We're drowning in debt," Marcus added, his voice barely above a whisper. "Credit cards, the mortgage, Sarah's shopping, we couldn't wait anymore. So you decided to kill me." I said it as a statement, not a question, because there was no question about what had happened here. "We didn't want to hurt you," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face now. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of anger at being caught, of self-pity for the consequences she was about to face. It would have been quick. Peaceful. Like going to sleep. The officer taking notes looked up sharply. "Ma'am, I need to advise you of your rights before you say anything else." But Sarah was beyond caring about her rights now. The facade had cracked completely, and all the poison that had been building inside her was pouring out. "Do you know what it's like?" she screamed at me, her face twisted with rage. "Watching you sit on all that money while we struggle? Knowing that you could help us, but you won't because you think we should learn to manage our finances better? You gave us everything when we were kids, and then you just stopped. I gave you a college education," I said, my voice rising to match hers. "I gave you a wedding that cost more than most people make in a year. I gave you a down payment on your house. When was it ever enough, Sarah? When would it have been enough?" "When you were dead," she shouted, and the words hung in the air like a curse. The restaurant was dead silent now except for the sound of Sarah's harsh breathing and Marcus's quiet sobbing. Other diners were holding up phones, recording this family's destruction for their social media feeds. The officers were speaking into their radios, calling for backup, for detectives, for all the machinery of justice that would now grind my daughter into dust. One of the officers stepped forward. "Sarah Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted murder." The Miranda rights faded into background noise as I watched my daughter's face cycle through denial, rage, and finally a kind of cold acceptance. This was who she really was underneath the loving daughter act. This was who I'd raised, who I'd failed to raise properly. A woman who could look her father in the eye and calmly plan his murder. As they led her away in handcuffs, she turned back to me one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice venomous. "You chose money over your own daughter." But she was wrong. I hadn't chosen money over her. She had chosen money over me. She had chosen my death over her own responsibility, my suffering over her own accountability. She had chosen to become someone I didn't recognize, someone who could poison her father's drink and sit there watching him die with a smile on her face. Marcus broke down completely as they arrested him too, blubbering about how it was all Sarah's idea, how he'd never wanted to hurt me, how he was sorry. But his apologies were meaningless now. Sorry doesn't bring back trust once it's been shattered. Sorry doesn't erase the image of your son-in-law encouraging you to drink poison. The paramedics arrived and insisted on checking me over, taking blood samples to make sure nothing had been absorbed through skin contact or inhalation. They kept asking if I felt dizzy, nauseous, confused, but the truth was I felt nothing. Nothing except a cold, empty space where my love for my daughter used to live. The detective who interviewed me was kind but thorough. She explained that the preliminary field test on the Jews had come back positive for a substance that would have killed me within hours. A slow, agonizing death that would have looked like a heart attack or stroke to anyone who wasn't looking for poison. They planned this carefully, she told me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. The substance they used had to be acquired in advance, mixed in specific proportions. This took time and research. Time and research. My daughter had spent time and effort figuring out how to murder me. While I was proudly telling my friends about her new job, her beautiful children, her seemingly perfect marriage, she was researching poisons on the internet. While I was planning how to help her family financially once I was settled into retirement, she was planning my funeral. The young waiter who'd saved my life was shaking when the police interviewed him. His name was David, and he'd only been working at Romano's for 6 months. He'd seen Sarah approach my glass while I was on the phone, seen her drop something into the orange juice and stir it quickly with a spoon before returning to her seat. "I almost didn't say anything," he told me later, his voice still trembling. "I mean, it was your daughter. Who suspects their own family? But there was something about the way she did it, so quick and secretive, and the way she kept watching you after. I couldn't live with myself if I'd stayed quiet and something happened to you. This kid, this stranger who owed me nothing, had more concern for my well-being than my own flesh and blood." The irony was so bitter I could taste it. The arrest made the local news, then the national news. "Daughter attempts to poison father for inheritance" was a headline that brought reporters to my door, cameras to my front yard, strangers calling my phone to ask how it felt to be betrayed by my own child. How did it feel? It felt like dying while still being alive. It felt like discovering that everything I'd believed about my life, my family, my legacy, had been a lie. It felt like standing in the wreckage of everything I'd worked for and realizing that the person I'd loved most in the world had been the one holding the match. Sarah's friends rallied around her at first, posting on social media about how there must be some mistake, how Sarah would never hurt a fly, how I must have misunderstood what happened. But as the evidence mounted, as the police released details about the poison and the premeditation, the support faded away. People don't want to be associated with attempted murderers, even if they used to carpool with them. The trial was a media circus. Sarah's lawyer tried to paint her as a desperate mother driven to extremes by financial pressure, but the prosecution had phone records showing she'd been researching my business finances for months before the sale went through. They had internet search histories for various untraceable poisons. They had testimony from Marcus, who'd flipped on her in exchange for a reduced sentence, describing how she'd spent weeks planning the perfect crime. I sat in that courtroom day after day, listening to the details of how my daughter had planned to kill me, and I felt something inside me shrivel up and die. Not just my love for her, but my faith in my own judgment, my trust in the fundamental goodness of people, my belief that family meant something more than shared DNA and financial opportunity. Sarah never looked at me during the trial. Never showed any remorse beyond tears of self-pity when the guilty verdict was read. 25 years to life for attempted murder in the first degree. She'll be eligible for parole when she's 53, assuming she serves the minimum sentence. My grandchildren, her children, are being raised by her mother-in-law now. They're too young to understand why mommy can't come home, why grandpa doesn't visit anymore. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that their mother tried to murder their grandfather? How do you maintain a relationship with children who look exactly like the woman who tried to poison you? The money, the 7-figure inheritance that Sarah killed for, sits in accounts I can barely stand to think about. I've rewritten my will 6 times, trying to figure out what to do with wealth that's been tainted by attempted murder. Most of it will go to charity now, to organizations that help elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse and worse. The irony isn't lost on me. My daughter's greed ensured that she'll never see a penny of the money she tried to kill me for. People ask me if I'll ever forgive her. If I'll visit her in prison, maintain some kind of relationship for the sake of the grandchildren, find a way to move past this. But how do you forgive someone for calculating your death? How do you move past the knowledge that your child spent weeks researching the best way to poison you, planning your funeral while pretending to celebrate your retirement? Forgiveness isn't about what she did to me. It's about what she revealed about herself, about who she really was underneath the daughter I thought I knew. You can't forgive someone for being a fundamentally different person than you believed them to be. You can only grieve the relationship you thought you had and try to build a new life from the ashes of your shattered illusions. The nightmares started about a month after the arrest. I dream about drinking the juice, about feeling the poison burn through my veins while Sarah watches with satisfaction. I dream about dying alone in that restaurant while my daughter checks her watch, counting down the minutes until her inheritance clears. I wake up gasping, my heart pounding, tasting phantom orange juice in my mouth. My doctor prescribed sleeping pills, but I'm afraid to take them. How do you trust any medication when your own daughter tried to poison you? How do you eat at restaurants, accept drinks from friends, take pills from pharmacists? The paranoia isn't rational, but rationality is a luxury I can no longer afford. The house feels different now. Every family photo, every memento from Sarah's childhood, every reminder of the relationship I thought we had feels like evidence of my own stupidity. I've packed most of it away, but I can't bring myself to throw it out entirely. Those pictures represent 28 years of love that I believed was real, even if it turned out to be one-sided. Sometimes I catch myself picking up the phone to call her, forgetting for just a moment that she's in prison for trying to kill me. The muscle memory of being a father doesn't fade quickly, even when the child proves unworthy of that love. I'll see something on the news that I want to share with her, or remember a funny story from her childhood, and reach for my phone before reality crashes back down. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound could. If a stranger had tried to poison me, I would have been angry, frightened, traumatized. But I would have understood it as random violence, motiveless malice, the kind of evil that exists in the world independent of me. This was personal. This was calculated. This was someone who knew exactly how much it would hurt and chose to do it anyway. Sarah took more than my trust when she put that poison in my juice. She took my faith in the future, my belief in family, my confidence in my own judgment. She took the joy I found in my grandchildren, because now I can't look at them without seeing her face. She took my peace of mind, because now I know that the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. But she didn't take everything. She didn't take my life, thanks to a young waiter who chose courage over convenience. She didn't take my will to survive, even though some days I wonder if dying would have been easier than living with this knowledge. And she didn't take my ability to choose who deserves my love and trust going forward. I've started volunteering at a senior center, helping other elderly people navigate financial planning and family relationships. It's amazing how many of them have stories similar to mine. Children who see their parents as obstacles to inheritance, families who turn predatory when money enters the equation. We're like a support group for people whose loved ones loved money more. There's something healing about helping others protect themselves from the kind of betrayal I experienced. Every time I help someone recognize warning signs in their own family relationships, every time I convince someone to be more careful about their financial information, I feel like I'm taking back some small measure of control from the chaos Sarah created. The money from my business sale has become a tool now rather than a burden. I've set up scholarship funds for students studying elder law, donated to organizations that investigate financial abuse, funded research into family dynamics and inheritance planning. If my wealth was going to make me a target, at least I can use it to protect others from becoming victims. I've also started speaking publicly about what happened to me. It's not easy standing in front of groups of strangers and admitting that your own daughter tried to murder you, but the response has been overwhelming. People approach me afterward with their own stories of family betrayal, financial abuse, children who've stolen from aging parents or pressured them into dangerous financial decisions. The statistics are staggering. Elder abuse by family members is far more common than anyone wants to admit, and financial exploitation by adult children happens in millions of homes across the country. I'm not unique. I'm not even unusual. I'm just one of the few who survived to talk about it. What makes my case different is the extremity of it, the pure malice of attempted murder. Most financial abuse is more subtle, unauthorized use of credit cards, pressure to change wills, manipulation around property transfers. But the underlying dynamic is the same, adult children who feel entitled to their parents' resources and are willing to harm those parents to get them. The letters I receive from other victims are heartbreaking. Elderly people who've been isolated from friends, manipulated into signing over their homes, convinced to make loans they'll never see repaid. Children who've stolen their parents' identities, run up debt in their names, forged their signatures on legal documents. The betrayal takes 1,000 different forms, but the pain is always the same. Some of these people ask me how I found the strength to prosecute my own daughter, how I could choose justice over family loyalty. But they're asking the wrong question. Sarah chose money over family loyalty when she put poison in my juice. I chose survival over enabling her crimes. There's a difference between protecting family and becoming complicit in your own destruction. The hardest part isn't the betrayal itself, it's the loneliness that comes after. When you can't trust your own child, it becomes difficult to trust anyone. When your family proves toxic, it's hard to build new relationships. The isolation is almost as destructive as the original crime, and it's something that many elder abuse victims struggle with long after the immediate danger has passed. I've been in therapy for over a year now, trying to work through the complex emotions around grieving a relationship with someone who's still alive. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, calls it ambiguous loss, mourning the daughter I thought I had while trying to process the reality of who she actually was. It's like attending a funeral for someone who's sitting in the same room, denying that they're dead. The anger comes in waves. Some days I'm furious at Sarah for what she tried to do, for the years of deception that led up to that moment, for the way she's destroyed our family. Other days I'm angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for enabling her financial irresponsibility, for raising a child who could grow up to be a would-be murderer. But underneath the anger is something worse, a profound sadness for the relationship we never actually had. I loved a daughter who didn't exist, who was a projection of my own hopes and dreams rather than a real person. The Sarah I thought I knew was generous, loving, grateful for the sacrifices I'd made for her family. The real Sarah was calculating, manipulative, and willing to commit murder for money. Which one was the act? Was she pretending to love me for 28 years, or did she genuinely love me until money corrupted that love into something murderous? I'll never know, and that uncertainty is its own kind of torture. The grandchildren are the hardest part. Emma is 8 now, Jason is 6, and they're growing up without understanding why Grandpa disappeared from their lives. Their grandmother sends me school pictures sometimes, updates about soccer games and piano recitals, achievements and milestones that I'm missing because their mother tried to kill me. I want to be part of their lives, but how do you explain to children that their mother is a dangerous person? How do you maintain a relationship with them without risking further manipulation or harm? What if Sarah tries to use them as leverage when she gets out of prison? What if she's already poisoned them against me with lies about why she's incarcerated? The legal system has mechanisms for protecting children from abusive parents, but it doesn't have good solutions for protecting grandparents from children who've proven themselves willing to commit murder. I have to choose between my own safety and my relationship with Emma and Jason, and that choice feels like another kind of death. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd drunk that juice. The coroner would have ruled it a heart attack or stroke, a sad but unsurprising end for a 68-year-old man who'd worked hard all his life. Sarah would have inherited everything, would have paid off her debts, would have raised my grandchildren on blood money while telling them what a wonderful grandfather they'd had. She would have gotten away with it. Completely, perfectly, with no consequences and no one the wiser. The thought makes me sick, but it also makes me grateful for David the waiter, for his courage and quick thinking, for his willingness to risk his job to save the life of a stranger. I've tried to repay that debt, setting up a college fund for David, helping him get into a better restaurant, making sure he knows how much his bravery meant. But you can't really repay someone for saving your life. You can only try to be worthy of the gift they've given you. That's what I'm trying to do now, be worthy of the life I almost lost. Every day I wake up is a day Sarah didn't intend for me to have, and I want to make those days count for something. Whether it's helping other potential victims, supporting research into elder abuse, or just being a voice for people who've been betrayed by their own families. The money that Sarah killed for will outlive us both now, doing good work in the world instead of feeding her shopping addiction and poor financial choices. There's some justice in that, some poetry in the idea that her greed will ultimately serve the very causes that work against people like her. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again, really safe, in the way that people who haven't been betrayed by their own children can feel safe. There's a hypervigilance now that never goes away, a constant awareness that the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Maybe some vigilance is healthy, especially when you have resources that make you a target. The Sarah I thought I knew is dead, and I'm learning to live in a world without her. It's lonely sometimes, especially during holidays and family occasions that feel empty without the daughter I thought I had. But it's also honest in a way our relationship never was. I'm no longer participating in a lie, no longer enabling someone who was always planning my destruction. People often ask me if I hate her now, if the love I felt for 28 years has turned to hatred. But hate requires caring, and I've had to stop caring about Sarah in order to survive what she did to me. Indifference is sometimes the only protection we have against people who would destroy us. What I feel now is sadness for the waste of it all. The waste of a life that could have been lived honestly, of a relationship that could have been real, of a family that could have been something beautiful instead of something toxic. Sarah had every advantage, every opportunity to build a good life without resorting to murder. She chose differently. That choice defines her now more than any happy memory from her childhood, more than any proud moment from her young adulthood. She's not my daughter anymore, she's the woman who tried to poison me. That's her legacy, her identity, her contribution to the world. She chose that for herself when she chose murder over honesty. The hardest lesson I've learned is that love isn't always reciprocal, that the people we sacrifice for don't always value those sacrifices, that family bonds can be more fragile than we want to believe. Sarah benefited from my love for decades while planning my death. That level of deception requires a kind of coldness I can barely comprehend. But I've also learned that survival is its own form of strength, that choosing to live fully after betrayal is a form of victory over those who would destroy us. Every day I wake up and choose hope over despair, trust over paranoia, engagement over isolation is a day Sarah's poison failed to claim. The young man who saved my life, David, he represents something important about humanity that Sarah's betrayal could have easily made me forget. There are good people in the world, people who will risk themselves to help strangers, people who choose courage over convenience. Not everyone is motivated by greed. Not everyone sees other people as obstacles to their own advancement. I have to believe that, have to hold on to that truth, or Sarah's poison will have killed me after all, just more slowly, through cynicism and isolation instead of chemicals. She took my daughter from me, but she doesn't get to take my faith in humanity. That's mine to keep or give away, and I choose to keep it. The money will do good work in the world. The young man who saved me will go on to help other people in other ways. The organizations I support will protect other elderly people from family predators. The stories I tell will help other potential victims recognize warning signs in their own families. Some good will come from this tragedy, even if Sarah never intended any good at all. That's my choice now, to make meaning from meaninglessness, to create purpose from betrayal, to build something worthwhile from the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about family and love. Sarah chose murder. I choose life. In the end, that might be the only victory that matters. A father never imagines his own child could become his enemy. Betrayal from blood cuts deeper than any wound, but it also taught me that survival is strength, and trust is priceless. If you want to know what happened after the police arrived, stay tuned for the next part. And please, like this video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means more than you know.